Well, let's take this on. I'm pleased to say we can speak to Dan Perry, who's an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the Associated Press in the Middle East. Joins us now from Tel Aviv. Mr. Perry, welcome to Al Jazeera. Hi there. So, what are your thoughts about this new proposal? Do you think it's a case of Israel proposing something that Netanyahu knows will not fly because he knows that Hamas won't agree to disarm under the current framing, or what's the calculation?
I think that's true. The calculation remains as it was. Netanyahu clearly has decided that he can't let his government fall, which it probably would if he ends the war, even in exchange for the hostages, because the far right refuses to end the war and leave Hamas in power. Now, I'm not sure I'm seeing a lot of good guys here, because Israel walked away from the deal that it signed under pressure from Trump in January, which would have ended the war in exchange for the hostages. On the other hand, Hamas, I suspect, is willing to see all of Gaza absolutely destroyed as it sticks to its guns, that it has to keep its militia going. I don't know if it's true that they're willing to hand over power, as has been suggested on Al Jazeera, in which case they'd keep their militia while not being in power. I suppose the question is, in a longer term, who is the rightful sovereign in Gaza and in the West Bank and Gaza? If it's a Palestinian Authority, then it's a little bit hard to argue that there needs to be a separate militia. I think these militias, from Hezbollah to the Houthis to the Iraqi militias that are answerable to Iran, to Hamas itself and Islamic Jihad, have not been helpful and undermine the authority of whoever is the legitimate government. Of course, the additional wrinkle is that Israel itself doesn't recognize the Palestinians.
Indeed, and on that front, Israel occupies Gaza, right? So legally, an occupied population has a right to resist, doesn't it?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, look, I don't believe that Israel occupied Gaza before October 7th, and ever since 2005. I know the argument that people use to claim it did. For me, an occupation is an occupation. When they had troops on the ground, when they had settlers all over the place, before 2005. But either way, Israel's position is close to indefensible when they won't even allow the Palestinian Authority to return to Gaza. So right. It really sort of looks like Netanyahu is willing to prolong the war, even though the majority of the Israeli public, vast majority, would like the war to end and get back the hostages, even as they too would want Hamas disarmed and gone. They're willing to make that deal.
Yeah, that is the counterweight to it, isn't there? That there may be a will within the cabinet to plough on with the bombing and the killing, but there are these growing demands for the war to end. And just take a look at this letter signed by thousands of Israeli reservists, even former Mossad figures, saying that the war must end. But the way it is right now, that is not even on the horizon, is it?
Yeah, look, it's a little bit odd for governments in a democratic country to be so indifferent to public opinion. Majorities of 70, 80% oppose not just the resumption of the war, but also the refusal to set up an inquiry commission from which Netanyahu would emerge tarred and feathered, for sure, as well as the continued, by the way, draft evasion by the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, who are Netanyahu's coalition partners. The government is incredibly unpopular, and it is walking a tightrope. Because it's true on the one hand that if the far right's threats are genuine, and I think they are, then ending the war would bring down the government mercifully in the eyes of most Israelis. On the other hand, if they plow on this way, polls show they would lose the next election. So Netanyahu is between a rock and a hard place, essentially, and as he continues his machinations and calculations, everyone suffers. Not just the Palestinian people, but also the Israelis.
Sure, indeed, as it goes on. Dan Perry, appreciates your contribution there. Thanks very much indeed. Dan Perry speaking just there from Tel Aviv.
My pleasure.